if you've got an amazing customer experience, the business will thrive. Similarly, employee experience, same idea.
And I always had this definition about the CX experience being separate from contact center. They're not the same thing. And I think these are some of the value propositions that a RingOffice 3CX solution delivers.
How do you get, from that question to that solution faster?
Yeah.
And make that more of a pleasant experience?
So welcome everybody to another special podcast that we're running with RingOffice and 3CX. Today's podcast is going to really talk about the impacts of EX and CX and really what this means in today's modern businesses. So I'm joined myself as Reza Cameron, and I'm joined by the CEO of RingOffice, Kishan Chaudhary. Kishan, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Reza.
Excellent. So, Kishan, let's start and define this a little bit more. When we talk about EX and CX, first of all, what is that? And then, in your view, why is this important to businesses today?
Yeah, wow. So, what is CX and EX? That's a pretty big question. It's such a broad field. CX is customer experience, EX is employee experience.
Got it.
Depending on how you look at it, it can be defined in many ways. I'd probably turn that question around to you first and say, well, what do you think EX and CX is from your perspective?
Well, look, I mean, if I was to look at this whole concept of EX and CX, and let's look at it from the communications perspective, I think that both of us have been involved in various sets of companies, and communications has been at the forefront of development activities. But as time has been going on, as we look at any type of cloud communications, I've seen cloud communication services, whether that be traditional UCaaS services or contact center, kind of moving from that that offense perspective to a defense perspective of the team, right? So when I think about defense, and I'm going back to a hockey analogy, no stereotypes here, but in the offense side of it, think of the Gretzky's of the world. Again, very old, but when something is offense, you're looking at the one guy that's going to score the goals, right? And so at one point, communications was so brand new and so important that it stood on the forefront. But when you look at defense, nobody cares about defense until it breaks down, right? That's just the reality of it. And so because of a lot of those factors that are happening in the communications perspective, there's been this inherent need to say, how do I look beyond just pure communications? And what can I leverage in terms of communications as it relates to those two areas of customer experience and employee experience? And I think that, people are looking at not just the importance of the communications, but the impact of those communications in those two fields. So what I've seen personally is that, when we go back in time, CX was always associated with, support, right? So I have a support team, and the four walls of support that's what customer experience means. Or even employee experience, I've seen it's always been evaluated as it relates to support. The reality is, if you look at many organizations today, especially in this whole SMB upper mid market, it's a very competitive space and a very competitive field. And so the importance of CX, and it's still very undefined, to be honest. Many organizations are trying to define it. So there's the contact center companies are saying, oh, well, it's just contact center. The reality of how I look at it is I think that CX is everybody's responsibility in an organization. In order to remain different in an organization, you cannot limit that CX and the experience to just support, right? So the impact of a CX experience, of what that means for sales, not just how they use it, what are the communication tools they're using, but the KPIs that are important, the integrations that are being used, and that every single department, as it's interacting with customers, may be very different. The tools may be different from a communications perspective. The interactions may be different, but it doesn't stop the importance of customer experience. And so that's my view, at least on the customer experience side.
Exactly. Yeah. So you made some excellent points, right? So you're absolutely right that people don't typically care anymore about the technology.
Yeah.
Right. So it just has to work, and it just has to not break down. And
Correct.
And the fact is, the technology does break down. So it has to be resilient, right? What happens when it does? So making that kind of go into the background and focusing on what is actually important, right? That's what people are looking for, right? Customer experience, every business, if you have a poor customer experience, the business will suffer.
Yep.
If you've got an amazing customer experience, the business will thrive. Similarly, employee experience, same idea, right? An employee is an internal customer, same idea.
Yep.
And I love your point there about looking beyond support, right? Because the fact is that customers are not only interacting with support or even your employees for that matter, right?
Yeah.
There's every function within an organization has some interaction with internal and external stakeholders, right? Or vendors or customers or whatever the case may be. And enabling them to optimize those experiences, right, is really what we're looking at.
Yeah.
So how do you do that, right? Now, we've got to put our technology hats on because we're technology people. How do we, in the background, right, in those shadows where we're running this, the technology, how do we enable these things to happen? And how do we make it seamless? That's what this is about, right?
But you mentioned something interesting, and I'll give you another point around this, around outside of support, which I thought was very interesting. And I remember we were doing some deployment models about 3 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, talking about contact center and then talking about customer experience. And I always had this definition about a CX experience being separate from contact center. They're not the same thing. So I remember talking to my CEO at one of the previous companies they're at, and I said, what, we have to look at the CX experience as it relates to sales or marketing. And I said, even our engineering teams need to have CX. And then I started moving on to the next topic. And then he was our CPO at the time, and he said, whoa, hang a second. He was very flamboyant in his discussions and said, why the hell would engineering ever need contact center? And I said, well, I didn't say contact center. I said CX, right? And the difference being that the interactions that team was having, they were having interactions with customers, just not at the same level. He says, well, what does that mean? I said, look, it doesn't mean they need a full-fledged contact center, but wouldn't it be great to actually have some basic level communications of, say, an omni-channel that they can interact with, say, for example, through, I don't know, WhatsApp or Facebook or messaging or SMS, in order to get some of the basic fundamental pieces that they need in order to establish things like how customers interact during beta testing, right?
If you go back in time a little bit, right, typically the interactions were always calls.
Yep.
So this whole discussion was just about managing call flows, making it more efficient, reducing hold times, making sure calls are not dropped,
right,
making sure that they're connected to the right person, making sure people are not jumping through hoops and being transferred from the first to the second to the third to the fourth contact before they get to the subject matter expert or the relevant or concerned specialist that they're trying to talk to. So those things are still there.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't go away because people still make calls. And you still need to be able to design a solution that intelligently can manage all of those things, so that when a voice interaction happens, that you end with an experience that leaves the customer happy,
sure,
leaves the customer satisfied, and so that's where your customer experience will land. But then you've got to look beyond that now, because in today's day and age, you got to face it that all those interactions are no longer just phone calls. Okay?
Yep.
You've got people, and especially as with the newer generations, people are less and less interested in making a call and more looking at communicating by text. Whether somebody's on your website and they want to do a live chat with your support on your website, whether they want to send you an SMS, or as you said, all these different messengers like Facebook and WhatsApp and so on, being able to have that omni-channel approach, being able to look at all of these interactions with the same way and say, okay, well, how do I optimize all of them? And not just for one department, right?
Yeah.
Because sales is interacting with customers, engineering, operations, billing, finance, customer service, support. Everybody has their own mandate and everybody is interacting with customers or vendors or some stakeholders for that matter, right?
Yeah.
So how do you look at all of these different types of interactions and how do you optimize all of these? And this is where you talk about, when you look at it from a communications perspective, you got to look at it, more holistically.
Yeah, and I think you briefly mentioned it, which is interesting. And I think these are some of the value propositions that a RingOffice 3CX solution delivers. As again, going back to those earlier comments we've always talked about, is not a one size fits all type of model can always work. When you need to get into the depths of EX and CX and customize experiences by individuals or by departments or all that kind of stuff, this is where flexibility is really needed in order to create that differentiation, right? And retain customers customers, reduce churn, and all the other things that are really required. Or even, like you said, on the employee side, right? If we treat an employee, and you made a really good point about calling an employee an internal customer, because if we treat our employees like they're customers, it kind of puts it in another perspective. Like, how does an employee, for example, interact with HR or IT, like IT, for example, if I've got problems with my computer? I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about efficiency at the end of the day. And so communication represents a forefront to that, because the way I interact with, and I'll be honest with you, in the past, where I've interacted with IT in the past, it's been an awful experience. Like, you're saying, okay, you know what? I got a problem with my computer. I got to send an email, right? And I send an email through, and okay, we'll get back to you in the next 24 hours. Okay, what am I supposed to do in the next 24 hours? Or if I'm contacting HR, let's suppose there's $1,000 missing from my paycheck. HR only has an email address. We'll get back to you in the next 48 hours. I want to know how efficient you're going to be if you're missing $1,000 from your paycheck. I'm not doing anything until I get this thing sorted out. So I'm going to be distracted. So I think the efficiency of communications, along with that employee experience, becomes a critical factor in order to optimize your business.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to throw another twist into this. Because since we're talking buzzwords, and you know, these days AI, right? I mean, AI has become one of the topics that, you know, you've got to be doing something in AI, whether you understand it or not, whether you know how you're going to use it or not, but it's become kind of a prerequisite, right?
Sure.
And so, you know, when we talk about customer experience and employee experience, you know, there are even more newer technologies and tools in the form of AI and generative AI solutions that are coming to the mix, which are also helping to improve, helping to manage some of the challenges which affect customer experience, right? So,
so do you see that as a replacement strategy? Like, because everybody, there's this fear of AI. It's gonna just, you know, and my personal point of view of this is that there's this view in the world that it's going to replace everything. I think people that's just been watching Terminator too many times, and you know, the cyber that's going to take over and all this type of stuff. I mean, the reality of the situation is that the way I've seen it being deployed has been, some people view of it as a strategy that says I can reduce my employees, but the reality is, I think what we've seen is, my humble opinion is, it's been an enhancement strategy. So rather than looking at it as a replacement strategy, how do I make my business more efficient? You know, whether it be from a communications perspective or even from a data capture, data collection perspective, right? I think both of those things play a critical role in both sides.
Yeah, I think it's my personal perspective is that I think that it'll be very hard to completely replace human interaction.
Right.
At the end of the day, you know, I know it's getting harder and harder, but I mean, you can tell.
Yeah, I mean, they don't even know that we're AI, right? No, I'm just kidding. We're real. We're real. You can pinch me.
So yeah, I mean, so that's something that you know, I think the way we look at it is, how can you augment the you know, the capability that you have right now using some of these tools? And there's a lot of great stuff coming. You know, even like with the latest version 20 of 3CX, there's already some AI functionality that's coming with in terms of sentiment analysis and you know, call transcriptions and things like that.
Right.
We're going to see more and more of this coming. I mean, you know, we were talking just a little while ago about chatbots and about, you know, so there's so many ways that, you know, you can make that interaction more efficient, right? How do you get, you know, from that question to that solution faster, and make that more of a pleasant experience?
Yeah,
right?
And I think the automation side of it, in terms of the communications piece, is one thing, and I think the other thing, which I'm sure 3CX is also working through, is the data capture and data collection. Right? How do you make it more efficient in terms of data, which is another big thing, because that allows a lot of efficiency in the world. I mean, this was a great conversation, Kashan. I really, really appreciate your time joining us today. I hope everybody's learned something about the whole impact of communications from a employee experience and customer experience, and hope to see you guys all again real soon.
I know I've learned something about it. Thanks a lot, Raza.
Thank you, Kashan. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.